Can you imagine waking up one cold morning in the Yorkshire Dales, where every stone in your house feels heavier than the last, and the air itself seems thick with memory? That was how Sir Reginald Beaumont greeted another lonely day in his old estate, the kind of place that had once thrummed with life, now echoing only with the sound of wind against window panes and the creak of tired floorboards. Yorkshire drizzle swept across the fields, painting the world in silvery gloom. But Reginald pulled on his weathered barber jacket, slipped his boots on, and stepped out anyway, because duty didn't pause for heartbreak. There, on the edge of his property, the ancient dry stone wall was sagging dangerously, battered by time, sheep, and storms. He muttered under his breath, hauling a heavy sack of tools and a flask of tea, wincing with each step as old injuries flared up. Once he had overseen vast portfolios in London's high-rises. Now his entire empire was this battered fence, and a run-down estate he could barely afford to heat. The world, it seemed, had moved on, and left the Beaumont name to gather dust with the family portraits inside. He reached the crumbling section of wall just as the mist thickened, softening the contours of the moor, muffling the distant cries of curlews. He set down his tools, wiped the rain from his brow, and took a reluctant bite of a limp cheese sandwich, a far cry from the elegant luncheons of his former life. His gloved hands worked slowly, stone by stone, every muscle aching, but he refused to let the land slip any further into neglect. Out here, there was no one to watch him fail but the sheep and the ghosts of his ancestors. Suddenly, a sharp crack of splintering wood rang out. Reginald froze, half bent over the wall, heart thumping in his chest. A shadow flickered in the mist, something low and quick, moving with an energy utterly out of place among the soggy sheep and sleeping hills. Before he could straighten up, a wild pony, dark, muddy, its mane tangled and glistening with rain, bolted straight through a gap in the hedge and collided with the fence, scattering stones and sending Reginald stumbling backward. He landed hard on the wet grass, mud soaking through his trousers. For a second, he just lay there, stunned, while the pony snorted, eyes wild, dancing nervously just out of arm's reach. The animal's flanks quivered with effort, breath fogging in the chilly air, and its hooves scraped frantically at the loose earth. Reginald's instinct was to yell, to shoo it away, as any sensible landowner would. But something in the animal's eyes, the raw wildness, the panic and pain and defiance, gave him pause. He sat up slowly, keeping his movements gentle, careful not to frighten the pony further. Rain pelted his face, mingling with the sweat of effort. Easy, easy now. His voice came out softer than he intended, barely more than a whisper lost in the moorland wind. The pony took a half step back, shaking its mane, but didn't run. He reached into his coat pocket, fumbling for anything to offer. Only the battered cheese sandwich came to hand. He hesitated, then held it out, feeling foolish. The pony eyed him, nostrils flaring, and to Reginald's astonishment, stepped forward. One quick snap, and the sandwich was gone, the pony's lips brushing his gloved fingers with surprising delicacy. Reginald laughed, a genuine, incredulous sound he hadn't made in months, and for a moment, the heaviness that had settled over his life lifted. What were the odds? A bankrupt nobleman, alone and soaked through, bribing a wild pony with a sandwich. He watched as the animal pranced away, pausing just beyond the ruined wall, looking back at him with a glint of challenge in its eye. "Is this some kind of sign?" Reginald muttered, scrambling to his feet, brushing mud from his knees. The pony let out a sharp whinny, tossing its head, and then, with no warning, bolted across the sodden field, heading uphill, deeper into the mist. Reginald hesitated only a second before following, heart pounding with something like hope, something reckless and childlike he hadn't felt since before the world fell apart. The chase led him through tangled bracken and slippery stones, up narrow sheep tracks winding between gnarled hawthorns and stunted oaks. He lost sight of the pony more than once, but always it reappeared just ahead, pausing to make sure he was still coming, almost as if inviting him onward. The wind grew sharper, tugging at his coat, pushing him up and over a ridge he had never bothered to climb in all his years on the estate. At the top, breathless, Reginald found himself looking down into a small, hidden valley, a place out of time, shielded from the worst of the Yorkshire weather by a ring of ancient stones. A spring bubbled clear among mossy boulders. The pony, Romer, he decided then and there, for its restless spirit, stood waiting, tail flicking, as if to say, "Well, are you coming or not?" Reginald stumbled down the slope, senses alive with excitement and disbelief. The valley was unlike any place he had seen. There, nestled among the ferns, stood the weathered remains of stone pillars, their surfaces carved with symbols half swallowed by centuries of rain. Celtic, perhaps Roman, he couldn't tell, but the sense of history was overwhelming. It wasn't gold he'd found, but something far older, deeper, a secret at the heart of Yorkshire itself. He knelt by the spring, letting the cool water run over his hands, and Romer came to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of the animal's body in the damp air. For the first time in a long time, Reginald felt truly alive, swept up in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. But as he looked up at the circle of stones, the words echoed in his mind. "But this secret will bring trouble." And the rain, as if in answer, fell harder, drumming out a warning only the Moors could understand. Reginald didn't know how long he knelt by that ancient spring, the cold water soaking into his gloves, his eyes drawn to the wild pony standing just a breath away. Romer, that was the name that stuck in his mind, seemed almost proud to have guided him here, nostrils flaring with the scent of moss and stone, the animal's coat shining in the damp, low light. In that moment, the ordinary weight of Reginald's life, the empty rooms, the unpaid bills, the memory of his wife's laughter lingering like a ghost in the halls, fell away, replaced by the sheer thrill of discovery. Reginald stood slowly, his knees stiff, every muscle aching from the chase. The mist parted just enough to reveal the heart of the valley. It wasn't large, but it was protected on all sides by ridges that funneled the wind high overhead, leaving the air below still and filled with birdsong. Along the edge, wildflowers, primrose and violets, pushed up through grass, their colors vibrant even beneath a gray sky. There, in the center, were the ruins. Circles of upright stones, some toppled, some still standing, their surfaces covered with strange, weathered markings. He stepped closer, squinting, fingers tracing a spiral pattern on one of the stones, half believing he could feel the hum of history beneath his fingertips. Romer wandered away, hooves barely making a sound in the moss, and Reginald followed, crossing the valley floor. At the far end, half hidden by a tangle of bramble and hawthorn, he found the remains of an old wooden gate long since collapsed. He climbed over, heart thumping, and almost laughed out loud at the sight on the other side. A shallow pool, fed by the spring, and, standing knee-deep in the water, 3 more ponies. They lifted their heads, eyes bright and alert, and Reginald froze, not wanting to spook them. Romer called out, a low nicker, and the others relaxed, dipping their muzzles back to drink. For a moment, Reginald just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching them, the sense of wonder growing until it threatened to burst from his chest. It was more than he'd hoped for. He'd stumbled onto something truly rare, a living remnant of England's past. He pulled out his phone intending to take a photo, but stopped himself, not wanting to break the spell. Instead, he found himself grinning, the kind of wild, unrestrained smile he hadn't managed in years. "Well, Romer," he murmured, "I think you've just changed my life." Romer snorted as if in agreement and trotted away toward the stones. Reginald followed, drawn back to the ancient circle. He wandered, circling the monoliths, hands brushing lichen, mind racing with half-remembered stories of the Celts, Roman legions, and Druidic rituals. It struck him that, somewhere in the tangle of family history, he'd once heard a tale about secret places on Beaumont land, but had always dismissed it as fanciful legend. Now, standing here, it seemed not only plausible but inevitable, as if fate itself had led him and this wild pony to this exact spot. As he moved around the largest standing stone, he noticed a hollow at its base, hidden by a curtain of ferns. Stooping, he reached in, fingers closing on something hard. Wood, leather, and the faint glint of tarnished brass. He pulled it free and realized it was an old journal, the cover cracked but intact, a Beaumont family crest pressed into the leather. Reginald's hands trembled as he opened it, the pages yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but legible. Dates ran along the top, 1811, 1812, 1813, each entry a terse record of weather, harvests, and occasionally mentions of the valley beyond the stones and the herd kept hidden from prying eyes. His heart pounded. This was proof, tangible, written proof, that his ancestors had known of this place and kept its secrets. He read on, discovering a roughly sketched map of the valley and notes about the spiral stones, and a warning to never speak of it to outsiders. The realization that he was following in their footsteps, literally and figuratively, sent a thrill through him. It wasn't gold or treasure, but something rarer, the living memory of a land and a people, protected across centuries. Before he could lose himself in the journal, a new sound cut across the quiet. A sharp, mechanical whirring, rising and falling in the air. Reginald looked up in confusion. Overhead, just above the stone circle, a small drone hovered, red lights blinking in the mist. Its camera lens pointed directly at him and the ponies. He stared, stunned, as the drone dipped lower, spinning in slow circles. Behind the valley ridge, a distant voice shouted, tinny and distorted, as someone called for the best shot for TikTok. A flush of anger surged through him. This place, so secret and sacred, invaded by a buzzing plastic intruder and the distant laughter of strangers. He waved his arms, shouting, "Hey, get out of here!" But the drone only drifted higher, camera fixed on him and the ponies. The herd spooked, splashing through the water and up the slope. Romer snorting, mane tossing, eyes wide with alarm. Reginald could do nothing but watch, fists clenched at his sides, as the moment shattered. He glanced back at the journal, clutching it tight, realizing how quickly this place could be ruined. One careless post, one viral video, and the valley would fill with tourists, influencers, and their endless appetite for spectacle. He needed to act, and fast, if he wanted to protect what he'd found. Reginald's excitement turned to resolve, a new energy running through him. He tucked the journal inside his coat, heart still racing, and turned to find Romer waiting at the edge of the stones, ears flicking back and forth, as if urging him to hurry. He followed, pushing through the brambles, already planning his next move. He would call someone he trusted. He would find a way to keep the valley safe. As he stepped into the wind, a sense of purpose, fierce, defiant, burned in his chest. For the first time in years, Sir Reginald Beaumont had a cause worth fighting for. But as he started back toward the estate, the sound of that drone echoed behind him, a reminder that the world outside was watching, always hungry for secrets it didn't care to understand. Reginald hurried through the twisting sheep trails, every step a mixture of dread and hope. The drone's buzz faded behind him, but its threat lingered. He clutched the old journal inside his jacket, feeling both the weight and warmth of history against his chest. As the mist rolled down from the moors, wrapping the valley in a pale shroud, Reginald paused to catch his breath. Romer waited nearby, the pony's eyes steady, like he understood exactly what had happened. The other ponies had vanished among the trees, but Romer stood by his side, unwavering. Reginald found himself laughing softly. He shook his head, rain dripping from his hair, the ridiculousness of the situation making him feel suddenly young. "Well," he murmured, "looks like it's just you and me, old friend." The wind carried his words away, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone. He set about making himself a small camp, using a fallen branch for a seat and a patch of dry grass under an ancient oak for shelter. The land was soft here, lush with moss and violets, the smell of wet earth strong in his nostrils. He boiled water from the spring on a tiny camping stove he always carried, more out of habit than need. The flames hissed as he brewed tea, the familiar scent rising up, reminding him of quieter days. He sipped slowly, letting the warmth fill him, while Romer grazed just beyond the reach of his hand. The pony's hooves barely making a sound in the soft earth. As the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, Reginald opened the journal again, fingers trembling slightly. He read page after page, learning how his ancestors had once cared for the valley, tending the ponies, keeping the place secret from all but a trusted few. He saw his great-great-grandfather's handwriting, sharp and elegant, describing the sacred stones, the legend of a hidden spring, the promise to guard the herd as part of the family's honor. With each line, Reginald felt his own pain receding, grief for his wife's absence, regret for the mistakes that had led to his downfall, the sting of public failure in London, all washed away by the steady, ancient rhythm of the valley. Here, nothing demanded from him except respect and patience. Here, he was not Sir Reginald Beaumont, failed financier or broken aristocrat. He was simply a man among the stones, bearing witness to something older and far greater than himself. Romer approached, nose twitching, and dropped a broken branch at Reginald's feet. He smiled, taking the branch, remembering how dogs used to fetch sticks in his childhood. The gesture was almost comical, but strangely moving, as if the pony was offering a peace token. Reginald set the branch on his little campfire, watching the flames dance higher, while Romer wandered off, only to return minutes later with a shiny stone balanced on his nose. "Are you trying to tell me something?" Reginald asked quietly. Romer nudged his shoulder, then trotted off toward the circle of stones. Reginald followed, leaving his camp behind, curiosity rising inside him. The valley was silent except for the trickle of water and the distant cry of a buzzard overhead. In the center of the stone circle, Romer stopped, stamping one hoof, looking back over his shoulder as if urging Reginald to hurry up. The stones seemed even more mysterious at dusk, their ancient markings casting long, crooked shadows. Reginald knelt and placed his hand on the largest stone, its surface cold and rough. He closed his eyes, feeling a connection he could not explain, a sense of belonging, a thread tying him not just to his ancestors, but to the land itself. It was a quiet, aching joy, the kind that grew stronger the longer he stayed. As evening settled, Reginald wandered the valley, exploring its hidden corners. He found traces of old campsites, bits of pottery, the rusty hinge of a forgotten gate. He tried to imagine those who'd lived here before, shepherds, druids, maybe even Romans. He made sketches in a small notebook, jotting down details for later, his mind already spinning with plans. The valley could be saved, he thought, if only he could keep its secret safe from greedy outsiders. By nightfall, the sky cleared, revealing a spill of stars over the moors. Reginald made a bed of bracken near the stones, Romer lying down nearby, the pony's breath slow and steady in the darkness. Reginald listened to the sounds of the valley, the gentle sigh of wind, the distant splash of the spring, the occasional snort from Romer or the other ponies hidden in the shadows. He drank the last of his tea and let his thoughts wander. He missed his wife, her clever humor, her stubborn loyalty, the way she used to nudge him out of his comfort zone. He thought of her as he watched the moon rise, silvering the stones and the pony's mane. He whispered a promise to her memory, a vow to try, to make something new from all he'd lost. He woke at dawn, stiff but alive, the sun rising in a pale band over the hills. Romer was already grazing, dew sparkling on his coat. Reginald packed his things, cleaned his campsite, careful to leave no trace. He took another slow walk around the stone circle, soaking in every detail, every scent, every sound. On the way out, Romer walked beside him, step for step, as if accompanying him back to the edge of the valley. When they reached the old broken gate, the pony stopped and looked up, eyes deep and unreadable. Reginald reached out, running his hand down Romer's neck, feeling the rough warmth, the heartbeat thrumming beneath the wild coat. "I'll be back," Reginald promised, voice steady. "And I'll keep you safe, all of you." Romer watched him go, tail flicking gently, and as Reginald climbed the ridge, he looked back one last time at the secret valley, the circle of stones, the spring, the wild ponies, and knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. But as he reached the crest and the village rooftops came into view, a wave of worry swept over him. The drone, the journal, the outsiders. Trouble was already on the horizon. And in the quiet heart of Yorkshire, a fight for the valley's soul was about to begin. The first blush of morning cast a honeyed light over the moors, softening the scars of yesterday's storms. Reginald walked the ridge toward his estate, boots slick with dew, Romer trailing at a safe distance. They moved as companions now, not adversaries, bound by the secrets and silences of that hidden valley. With every step, the world of ledgers and debt, of London's cold, judging eyes, seemed further away. In its place grew something quieter and far more real, a duty handed down in the soil and the wind and the wild hearts of ponies. At the boundary fence, Romer paused, nostrils flaring as if taking in the scent of Reginald's life, the lingering traces of pipe smoke, damp wool, and faded privilege. Reginald crouched, running his fingers along the pony's muddy jaw, feeling the rough brush of mane against his palm. For a long moment, neither moved. A wood pigeon called from the hedgerow, and somewhere in the distance, the slow grind of a tractor echoed across the dales. "I suppose we're both strays now, aren't we?" Reginald murmured. Romer snorted softly, then, with a toss of his shaggy head, melted back through the gap in the wall, vanishing into mist as suddenly as he had first appeared. Reginald returned home to his empty kitchen, peeling off wet layers, kettle rattling to life. He stared through the steamed-up window at the old garden, overgrown, gone wild, wondering what his wife would say about this strange new chapter. Would she laugh? Would she roll her eyes at the idea of him chasing wild ponies through the fog? Or would she see in his tired face the flicker of hope he barely understood himself? He spent the morning writing, journaling in his own spidery hand, recording every detail he could remember. The spiral carvings, the chill of the spring on his skin, the herd's wary glances, Romer's branch offerings, the firelight flickering on mossy stone. When words failed him, he sketched awkward, earnest drawings of stones, of ponies grazing, of the broken gate at the valley's edge. He made copies of the oldest family journal, careful not to damage the brittle pages, his mind spinning with questions and theories. Had any other Beaumonts ever truly protected the valley, or had it always depended on chance and luck and the faith of a wild animal? Late in the afternoon, Reginald laced his boots again and returned to the fields, driven by a new sense of responsibility. The fence needed mending. The sheep required checking. There was comfort in the rhythm of it. The scrape of wire, the smell of earth, the satisfying snap of a well-set post. The world, for a little while, shrank to the size of his hands, but every so often he would glance toward the horizon, half expecting Romer to appear. Sometimes the pony did, watching from a distance, never coming closer than a few dozen yards. Other times, it was only the wind and the shifting shadows among the gorse. When dusk fell, Reginald made tea and took his cup out to the barn. He sat on a bale of hay, watching as the evening mist crept along the ground. The quiet felt softer now, less oppressive than before, as if the land itself was slowly allowing him to belong. He pulled the old journal from his coat and leafed through the entries by lantern light, stopping at a line that made his breath catch. "We do not own the land. The land owns us. Its stories outlive our fortunes." He closed his eyes and let those words settle. That night, he slept better than he had in years. The next day, Reginald set out early, skirting the boundary of his property, slipping past hedgerows and stone walls slick with lichen. He carried apples in his pocket, uncertain whether he meant them for Romer or for himself. As he neared the valley's entrance, he slowed, breathing in the sharp, green scent of bracken and the sweet undertone of wildflowers. He waited, uncertain, heart thumping in his chest. Minutes passed. Then, with the cautious grace of something half-wild, Romer appeared, watching him with dark, intelligent eyes. Reginald held out an apple, fingers steady. The pony hesitated, then stepped forward, teeth crunching into the fruit with surprising delicacy. Reginald smiled, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. He spent hours in the valley that day, taking careful notes, drawing the layout of the stones in the spring, cataloging every flower, every bird call, every hoofprint. Romer followed him, sometimes bringing trinkets, another smooth stone, a tuft of sheep's wool, a fallen feather, laying them at Reginald's feet as if to say, "Pay attention." It became a ritual. Romer as guide, Reginald as chronicler. In the afternoons, Reginald would sit by the spring, brewing tea over a small fire, letting the valley fill him with a deep, unfamiliar peace. Sometimes He would read aloud from the old family journal, his voice echoing between the stones, the words mingling with bird song and the gentle trickle of water. Other times, he would simply listen, listening for stories in the rustle of leaves, the stamp of hooves, the sigh of wind over the hills. There were hard moments, too. Doubt gnawed at him. What right did he have to claim this place, to intervene? Was he just another interloper, another man trying to write his name on land that did not belong to him? But each time Romer approached, each time the herd appeared among the ferns, he felt a fragile trust growing, an invitation to belong if only he could prove worthy. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red and gold, Reginald sat at the edge of the valley, legs dangling over a mossy stone. Romer pressed close, resting his head on Reginald's knee, the pony's breath slow and even. Reginald stroked the animal's mane, feeling the wild strength beneath his fingers. "If the land chooses us," he said softly, "maybe all we have to do is listen." Romer flicked his ears, as if in agreement. That night, as he walked home beneath a sky bright with stars, Reginald felt changed, lighter, steadier, as if some old burden had slipped from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he looked forward to tomorrow. But on the edge of his peace, unease lingered. The valley's secret would not remain safe forever. Already the world outside was stirring. Drones, rumors, the hungry eyes of those who saw only profit where he saw wonder. And deep in the night, Reginald resolved. He would protect this place, whatever it took. It started small, as these things always do. A trail of snack wrappers glinting along the footpath, footprints pressed deep into the mud near the hidden valley's entrance, a fragment of bright orange plastic caught in the brambles. Reginald noticed them on his morning walk, his heart sinking as he knelt to clean the mess. He tucked the wrappers into his coat pocket, brushing the earth with his palm, wishing away the uneasy chill in his gut. For days he tried to ignore it. The world crept closer, inch by inch, a careless boot print here, a selfie carved into the bark of an old beech there. But when he saw the drone again, black and spider-like, whirring overhead with its glassy lens aimed down into the heart of the valley, something in him snapped. He watched from behind the ridge, hidden by a stand of hawthorn, as the machine hovered, dipped low, and zipped away toward the neighboring farm. The next morning, the valley felt different. The herd was restless, clustered near the far end of the spring. Romer paced, ears pinned, tail lashing at invisible flies. Reginald tried to calm him, but the pony shied from his touch. It wasn't until Reginald walked the perimeter that he understood. Someone had set a wire snare, buried in the grass where the ponies grazed. Reginald's hands shook as he disabled it, anger rising hot and fast in his chest. This wasn't just carelessness now. This was cruelty. Then, as he rounded the old gate, he saw Romer limping, a fresh gash across his leg, blood smeared in a crimson line down his fetlock. The sight brought Reginald to his knees. He worked quietly, voice trembling as he soothed the pony, cleaning the wound with water from the spring, tearing strips from his own shirt to make a rough bandage. Romer's breath came in shuddering bursts, his eyes rolling white with fear. Reginald stroked his neck, whispering nonsense, feeling the animal's pain as keenly as if it were his own. "You're all right. You're all right now," he murmured, hands steady even as his mind raced with panic and fury. This was more than an accident. Someone wanted the ponies gone. He spent hours tending Romer, sitting by the spring, watching the sunlight flicker through the leaves. The other ponies circled close, wary but trusting, as if they too understood what was at stake. Reginald made a vow. He would not let this place fall. He would not let these animals become casualties of greed. Later, as he walked back toward his house, Reginald's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down, expecting some minor update from the village. But what he saw made his stomach drop. A news alert, forwarded by a local contact, linking to a viral video shot by Victoria Slade, the influencer he'd glimpsed once or twice at the pub. The thumbnail showed a blurred shot of Romer, ears pricked, silhouetted against the ancient stones. The video was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, even local news. It was all hashtags and breathless captions. Hidden Valley, Chaos, Secret Ponies, Wild Yorkshire. Victoria's voice narrated, all gleaming teeth and wide-eyed wonder. You won't believe what we found hiking near an old estate. Wild ponies, stone circles, pure magic, guys. Like follow, share. Reginald's jaw clenched. There it was. The valley, exposed to the world in 15 shallow seconds. Within hours, the lane leading up to his land filled with parked cars and muddy footprints. Strangers tramped across the fields with selfie sticks, drone bags, and takeaway coffees, eager to chase the magic they'd seen on their screens. Some waved, others ignored his greetings. Many slipped through gaps in the hedge, paying no mind to fences or boundaries. Reginald's patience wore thin. He called out, asking them to respect the land, to keep their distance from the herd. Most shrugged him off. Some laughed, one or two glared as if he was the intruder. He watched, helpless, as children chased the ponies, their parents busy posing for Instagram stories. Empty Red Bull cans and snack bags bloomed in the grass. That evening, Romer stayed at the edge of the valley, limping, the wound on his leg swollen and angry. Reginald sat beside him, grief mixing with rage. "I'm sorry, old friend," he whispered, fingers buried in the pony's mane. "I failed you. I failed all of this." The sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky a bruised purple. Reginald's phone chimed again, an email this time, sent from an anonymous tipster with an attachment marked Urgent Development Proposal. He opened it, pulse pounding. There, in sleek corporate language, was a plan. Marcus Blackwood, the infamous developer from Manchester, had quietly acquired an option to buy land abutting Reginald's property. The documents detailed an ambitious resort complex, hotels, spa, golf, luxury lodges, projected start date as soon as the council approved. Reginald's blood boiled. He read the plan twice, then a third time, disbelief sharpening into a cold, determined fury. This wasn't just about tourists anymore. It was about losing the valley forever, paving over history for profit. He pictured the ancient stones flattened beneath concrete, the ponies chased out, the spring capped and forgotten. He stared into the gathering dark, anger pulsing in his temples. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he muttered, voice low, the words solid as granite. "Not ever." That night, Reginald sat at his battered kitchen table drawing up a plan. He emailed Dr. Eleanor Hargrove, the only person he trusted with the truth, the only one who might know how to fight a battle like this. He attached photos, scans of the old family journal, a copy of Marcus's proposal. "Eleanor," he wrote, "I need your help. This place is in danger. Call me as soon as you can." As he pressed send, Reginald looked out the window at the moonlit fields, at the distant silhouette of Romer standing guard. The fight had come to his doorstep, whether he was ready or not. And this time, he would not back down. But as dawn crept over the Yorkshire hills, bringing with it a new day and more strangers, Reginald knew the hardest battle was just beginning. Reginald didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, the hum of his laptop loud in the quiet house, drafting emails and searching through old files, the weight of responsibility sitting heavy on his shoulders. Outside, moonlight bled through the cloud cover, bathing the estate in a soft, silver gloom. Every so often, he glanced out at the fields, searching for Romer's silhouette, his mind replaying the day's humiliations and wounds. By dawn, his plan was set in motion. The first step: reach out to Dr. Eleanor Hargrove. He called her at sunrise, voice tight but steady, heart thudding as the line rang and rang. Finally she answered, her tone brisk and practical. "Reginald, you sound like hell. What's happened?" He explained everything: the drones, the wound on Romer's leg, the wave of trespassers, and the threat from Marcus Blackwood. Eleanor listened, occasionally jotting down notes, her concern sharpening with every detail. "I'll be up by midday," she said, "and I'll bring evidence kits and my National Trust credentials. We'll need to document everything: environmental impact, heritage, you name it. And Reginald, don't let anyone push you around. This valley matters more than they know." As soon as he hung up, Reginald moved through the morning like a man possessed. He snapped photos of litter, tire tracks, the injured ponies, careful to record dates and times. He drafted a post for the village Facebook group, polite but firm, urging respect for the land and its animals, hinting at legal consequences for trespass. Within an hour, his post had been shared dozens of times, the comments a chorus of local outrage and a few mocking memes from outsiders. But what he didn't expect was how quickly his story began to spread. Within hours, the hashtag #SaveYorkshireValley trended locally, then caught fire on Twitter and Instagram, boosted by environmental groups and animal lovers. Eleanor arrived, wind-blown and fierce in her waxed jacket, her boots caked in mud. She set to work immediately, testing the spring water, tagging GPS locations, and interviewing Reginald on camera. "Don't just tell the story," she advised. "Show it. Let people feel what you felt when you found the stones, when Romer came to you." Together, they filmed short videos, Reginald describing the herd, the ancient history, the fragile ecosystem. Eleanor edited and posted the clips in real time, tagging conservationists and local journalists. The response was swift. Hundreds of messages of support, offers to volunteer, and, inevitably, a surge of new visitors. But the tide wasn't all friendly. By afternoon, a caravan of influencer types rolled up. Selfie sticks, branded jackets, GoPros bouncing on their chests. Victoria Slade led the charge, flanked by her entourage and a pair of nervous interns filming her every move. She swept past Reginald with a practiced smile. "You must be the landowner," she chirped. "We're just here for a few shots, maybe some B-roll for my next collab. Don't worry, we love animals." Reginald tried reasoning with her, voice calm but insistent. "Please. The ponies are wild. The ground is fragile. Your followers have already caused a lot of harm. Romer was injured because of a snare. We need to protect this place, not turn it into a circus." Victoria barely listened. She gestured to her followers. "Spread out, get the best angles. Guys, if you see the ponies, stay back, but try to get the stones in the shot, okay?" Her words were drowned out by the whir of drones and the shriek of laughter. Reginald's anger simmered. Eleanor stepped in, her badge flashing. This is a heritage site under review. National Trust is documenting everything. Continued trespass will be reported to the authorities. You are damaging a protected ecosystem. She took out her phone and began filming the group, capturing faces and license plates. Victoria rolled her eyes, putting on her concerned face for her camera. We're just showing people the beauty of Yorkshire. If it's so special, maybe you should have protected it better. Her followers cheered, some booing Reginald and Eleanor, others jeering about gatekeeping nature. The argument escalated, the tension palpable. Reginald stood his ground, reminding everyone that the law was on his side and that the land's history mattered more than likes or viral moments. He demanded they leave, and after a few minutes, some filming the whole standoff for their stories, the influencers retreated, their laughter sharp as broken glass. But not everyone left. Stragglers lingered by the stones, snapping photos and leaving trash. Romer and the herd retreated deep into the valley, their shapes ghostly in the gathering mist. Reginald's heart ached with frustration. Even as public support swelled online, on the ground, chaos reigned. Later that evening, Eleanor pulled him aside as they sat on the stone wall near the spring, sharing a cup of tea poured from Reginald's old thermos. The day's fight had left them both battered, but there was steel in Eleanor's eyes. You did well, Reginald. This is only the first battle. Next is getting council support, documentation, petitions, the press. We'll fight this on every front. Reginald nodded, resolve settling deep inside him. I won't give up, he said quietly. Not for anything. That night, as a cold wind rattled the windows and the sounds of the influencers faded, Reginald updated the campaign's page, adding new photos and a plea for help. Donations began to trickle in, accompanied by heartfelt messages from people who saw the valley not as a resource, but as a treasure. As he looked out across the moonlit fields, Reginald spotted Romer standing near the edge of the stones, the pony's injured leg healing, his eyes shining in the dark. Reginald felt hope flicker again, fragile but stubborn. The fight was just beginning, and he was no longer alone. But in the valley below, the sound of engines and raised voices warned him. The battle for Yorkshire's heart had only just begun. Morning came slow and gray. A blanket of fog draped over the valley, muffling the sound of early birds and distant engines alike. Reginald stood at his kitchen window, tea cooling in his hand, eyes fixed on the hills beyond. His phone buzzed with messages, support from strangers, angry complaints from the council, press requests, petitions, a dozen warnings from neighbors about more tourists arriving, more damage done. He felt hollowed out, running on fumes, every new alert scraping his nerves raw. He walked the boundaries at first light, boots sinking into sodden earth. Romer appeared by his side, the wound on his leg healing but still visible, the pony's presence a quiet reassurance against the tide of chaos. Reginald reached out, resting his hand on Romer's neck, drawing courage from the animal's steadiness. They walked together along the edge of the valley, where fresh trash glimmered in the wet grass. Plastic bags snagged in the brambles, footprints trampled deep into the moss. He picked up every scrap, pocketed every can, cursing quietly under his breath. The herd had retreated further into the valley, growing more skittish with each passing day. Even the birds seemed quieter now, the air heavier with tension. Reginald felt it too, a growing fear that everything he had fought for would slip away, that history and wildness and beauty would be drowned beneath concrete hashtags and endless noise. He met Eleanor at the spring, her expression grave. She held a thick envelope, her fingers stained with ink and mud. "You've been served," she said, voice flat. "Marcus Blackwood filed a lawsuit, claiming you're interfering with lawful development. He wants an injunction, says you're inciting trespass, damaging business interests." Reginald felt his chest tighten. "He's suing me? For protecting my own land?" "Not just you, me too. National Trust, even Oliver next door. It's intimidation. He's betting you'll fold." Reginald stared at the paper, anger rising beneath his exhaustion. The words swam in front of his eyes. Property rights, cease and desist, damages, loss of income. He could almost hear Blackwood's oily voice, smug and certain, turning centuries of history into numbers on a spreadsheet. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "Don't give up. This is exactly what he wants. We'll fight it. We'll call every conservation lawyer in Yorkshire. We'll get the press involved, raise the stakes. You're not alone, Reginald." He nodded, the gesture small but determined. "I won't let him win. I won't lose this place to greed or fear." The next days blurred together. A flurry of emails, phone calls, meetings with local officials who shook their heads and muttered about the power of money. Reginald posted updates online, filmed short videos with Eleanor, pleaded for help from anyone who would listen. Donations spiked. Volunteers arrived to help with cleanup, but so did more thrill-seekers drawn by the spectacle, trampling the delicate moss, crowding the stones for selfies. One afternoon, as Reginald patrolled the valley, he heard angry voices near the main path. He hurried over, Romer trailing behind. A group of local farmers, led by Harold Croft, stood arguing with two men in suits. Blackwood's representatives, judging by the expensive shoes and the way they sneered at the mud. The farmers wanted to graze more sheep on the hills, blaming the ponies and the newcomers for ruined pastures. The lawyers spoke in clipped tones, waving legal documents, promising compensation for cooperation. Reginald stepped between them, voice clear and firm. "This land is not for sale, not to Blackwood, not for industrial grazing. This valley belongs to history, to these animals, to everyone who cares about more than just profit." Croft glared, face red with frustration. "Easy for you to say. Your family's had this land forever. Some of us are just trying to survive." Reginald met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Survival doesn't mean destroying what makes this place special. We can find another way. Together, if you'll work with us, not against us." For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then Oliver Thorne, the neighboring farmer who'd long watched Reginald's struggles with quiet sympathy, stepped forward. "He's right. There's a grant for sustainable farming. Eleanor helped me apply last year. We can protect the valley and keep our herds if we stop fighting each other." Reluctantly, Croft nodded, grumbling, but the message spread. Others murmured agreement, a fragile alliance forming in the shadow of Blackwood's threat. That evening, Reginald and Oliver sat on the old stone wall overlooking the spring, sipping beer from battered cans. Romer grazed nearby, his limp almost gone, the rest of the herd moving slowly through the tall grass, wary but present. Oliver raised his can. "You know, I always thought you were just another out-of-touch landowner, but you're stubborn as a mule. We might have a chance after all." Reginald chuckled, a genuine smile breaking through his fatigue. "I'll take that as a compliment." The night air was cool, full of the scent of wild thyme and damp earth. Eleanor joined them, her hair wind-blown, her eyes shining with resolve. She handed Reginald a thick stack of petitions and letters from schoolchildren, their crayon drawings of ponies and stone circles a burst of color in the twilight. "Hey, these are for you," The world's watching now. Blackwood's not used to fighting people who care this much. Reginald held the letters, his hands steady. For the first time in weeks, hope burned strong in his chest. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But he had allies now, people who believed in the valley, who saw its value beyond price tags and headlines. As the stars blinked awake overhead, Reginald stood, watching Romer lift his head and snort into the cool air. He knew there would be more battles ahead, more lawsuits, more threats, more days when despair threatened to drown him. But tonight, he wasn't alone. The land had chosen its defenders, and Reginald Beaumont, for all his faults and failures, would not let it down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, surrounded by friends, by wild ponies and hope, Reginald allowed himself to believe that Yorkshire's heart might yet be saved. Reginald woke before dawn, feeling a rare surge of energy pulse through his tired bones. For weeks, the valley had been a battleground. Lawyers, developers, influencers, angry farmers, and most of all, the struggle within himself not to give in to exhaustion or despair. But this morning, the air smelled different. The rain had passed, leaving the grass sparkling with dew. The sky stretched wide and clean above the ridges. Reginald dressed quickly, not even bothering with breakfast, drawn outside by the possibility that something had shifted. He wasn't alone. Down by the spring, Eleanor was already there, poring over spreadsheets and legal documents with the same intensity she once brought to their university debates. Oliver arrived soon after, leading 2 sheepdogs and a boy from the village who wanted to help pick up trash. They worked together in silence at first, clearing away plastic bags, repairing a broken fence post, setting up a temporary sign explaining the importance of the valley's delicate ecosystem. Each act was small, almost invisible, but Reginald could feel a change in the land's spirit, as if the valley itself was learning to trust them. By mid-morning, a van from the local news station trundled up the lane. A reporter with a northern accent and muddy boots hopped out, asking questions about the ponies, the old stones, and the David and Goliath fight that had turned Yorkshire's quiet corner into the center of a national debate. Eleanor handled the interviews with her usual poise. Oliver shared stories about the old ways of farming, and Reginald told the tale of Romer and the first time the wild pony had appeared from the mist. Cameras rolled as Romer trotted through the background, his limp nearly gone, mane shining in the sun. The news segment aired that afternoon, and by evening, the fundraising page Eleanor had set up was overflowing. Small donations from as far as Cornwall, notes from retired school teachers, artists, hikers, students, a woman in London who remembered her grandfather's stories of the Dales. Volunteers offered help, lawyers to counter Marcus Blackwood's claims, environmental groups pledging to lobby for protection status, and even a folk band who wanted to organize a benefit concert. The phone rang so much Reginald had to leave it inside just to have a moment's peace, but there was no time to rest. Marcus Blackwood, sensing the shift in public opinion, doubled down. His lawyers sent new letters, thick with threats and legal jargon. Victoria Slade, desperate to keep her content trending, filmed herself outside the valley's entrance, crocodile tears streaming as she accused Reginald of bullying the little people and gatekeeping Yorkshire's magic. The village divided, some drawn in by the allure of fame and fast money, others rallying around Reginald and the cause of the valley. Old friendships broke, new ones formed in their place. But Reginald felt different now. The loneliness and self-doubt that had haunted him since losing his wife and career began to recede, replaced by a quiet, stubborn confidence. He met every challenge head-on, attending council meetings, giving interviews, organizing volunteer days. Eleanor proved tireless, working through the night on legal strategies. Oliver kept the farmers' trust, arguing for grants and compromises that let tradition and conservation share the same ground. Then came the day that changed everything. Eleanor burst into the kitchen, hair wild, eyes blazing, holding an official-looking letter. "We did it!" she shouted. "National Trust approved the protection application. The valley's going to be a heritage site. No development, no resorts, and Marcus can't bulldoze so much as a blade of grass without risking jail time." Reginald stared at her, stunned. "You're serious?" She laughed, throwing her arms around him. "Serious as Yorkshire rain. And there's more. A crowdfunding campaign went viral last night. We've got the funds for ongoing care, education programs, you name it. We're not just saving the valley, Reginald. We're transforming it." News spread like wildfire. Supporters streamed in from all over, not to trample, but to help. Cleaning, planting native flowers, restoring the ancient stones, even offering workshops for children on the valley's history and ecology. Local school kids drew new signs, bright with wild ponies and spiraling stones, while Oliver's wife baked enough scones to feed an army. The folk band played under a makeshift tent, music drifting over the hills as people danced in the grass, laughing, hands joined. For the first time in years, the estate felt alive with hope. As dusk settled, Reginald wandered down to the spring. Romer waited there, head high. The other ponies gathered around. In the soft evening light, Reginald watched as a new foal, a spindly-legged colt with a star-shaped patch on its brow, stepped out from behind Romer, blinking at the world with wide, dark eyes. The sight stole Reginald's breath. He knelt, reaching out, and Romer nudged his hand forward, letting the foal sniff his palm. The others watched in silence as the foal pressed close, trembling, then settled down beside Reginald's knee. It felt, in that moment, as if the land itself was welcoming him into a new kind of family. A family not defined by blood or title or wealth, but by shared struggle and hope. Reginald looked up, tears blurring his vision, and saw Eleanor and Oliver standing at the edge of the circle, smiling, arms around each other. The valley had chosen them all, and they had answered. Later that night, as the stars brightened over the Dales, Reginald wrote in his journal, "This is what legacy means. Not ownership, but stewardship. Not walls, but bridges. Not isolation, but connection. The valley endures, and through it, so do we." As he closed his eyes, the sound of ponies nickering softly in the dark, Reginald felt the burdens of loss and loneliness finally begin to lift. The fight was not over. There would always be those who saw only what could be taken, not what could be cherished. But for now, in the heart of Yorkshire, the wild ponies ran free, and hope rose with every sunrise. The early days of summer settled over Yorkshire with a gentle warmth, the kind that made even the ancient stones feel alive beneath the sun. The valley was no longer a secret, but it had become something richer, a sanctuary, a living classroom, a bond that tied together people who might otherwise have remained strangers. Each morning, Reginald walked the ridge above the spring, Romer trailing at his side, sometimes leading, always watchful. The other ponies grazed below, their foal frisking through the long grass, a little miracle no one took for granted. Reginald kept busy with new responsibilities, but the work felt less like a burden and more like a calling. School children arrived by the busload now, led by teachers eager to give them something real. A day away from screens, a chance to touch the world instead of just watching it. Eleanor ran lessons among the stones, teaching the kids about ecosystems, ancient cultures, the hidden value in things that couldn't be bought or sold. She was a natural, her voice ringing clear as a bell, her laughter infectious, and Reginald often watched from a distance, quietly proud to be part of her fight. But even in these joyful weeks, he found himself reflecting on the valley's true lesson. For years, he'd clung to the remnants of his birthright, his name, his estate, a set of responsibilities inherited as much by accident as by design. He'd tried to hold on, to preserve what he could, believing that if he just worked hard enough, he could honor his family's past. Now, standing amid the stones, watching the children listen with wide eyes as Romer grazed nearby, Reginald realized how narrow that vision had been. The valley had survived not because it was his, but because he finally understood it was never meant to belong to anyone at all. On a sun-drenched afternoon, Reginald sat beside the spring with a group of students sketching wildflowers, their crayons scattered on the grass. One girl, her knees streaked with mud, looked up and asked, "Did your family really keep this place a secret for hundreds of years?" Reginald considered her question, choosing his words with care. "I think in some ways we just listened to the land," he said, voice calm. "Sometimes protecting something isn't about locking it away. It's about understanding what makes it special and sharing that carefully with others who care." He paused, watching Romer graze with the foal at his side, the circle of stones silent witnesses to centuries of change. "This place doesn't belong to me or to anyone. We're its keepers for a little while, that's all. If we listen, if we really listen, it tells us how to care for it." The children nodded, most too young to grasp the weight of what he meant, but their teacher smiled, and Reginald felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The valley taught its lessons gently, but sometimes its truths came with a sting. One morning, Reginald found a pile of fresh litter left by careless visitors. His initial anger was sharp. Hadn't they all worked so hard to educate, to inspire, to protect? But Eleanor reminded him, as she always did, that change was slow, and every victory was worth the effort. They organized another cleanup day, this time joined by Croft and a half-dozen local farmers, men and women who'd once doubted Reginald's motives, but now spoke with pride about our valley and our ponies. At a community meeting in the village hall, Reginald shared the story of the fight, the legal battles, the threats, the sleepless nights, and the unexpected joy of allies found in unlikely places. Oliver stood up and described how the National Trust grant had saved his farm, allowing him to keep his herds and still honor the land's wildness. Croft, never one for speeches, simply nodded and said, "We did good. Let's keep it that way." A journalist from the BBC came to film a segment on the valley, and Reginald, older now, hair streaked with gray, spoke softly about responsibility. "The real lesson here," he said, "is that heritage isn't about ownership or even tradition. It's about humility, about listening to nature, to each other, to the quiet voices of the past, and then doing what's right, even when it's hard." He looked into the camera, thinking of the way the spring bubbled from the earth, the way Romer and his herd had chosen to trust him, the way hope could rise up, even from the ruins of loss. "This isn't just my story," he said. "It's everyone's story, if we let it be." In quieter moments, Reginald took time for himself. He walked the boundaries alone at dusk, the world awash with gold and purple, the air rich with the scent of new growth. He thought of his wife, not as a memory tinged with sorrow, but as a presence woven into every gentle breeze, every bird call, every moment of gratitude. He knew now that grief and joy could live side by side, that letting go wasn't forgetting, and that the valley had healed more than just the land. Sometimes he found Romer waiting for him on the ridge, the foal at his side, the rest of the herd cropping grass nearby. Reginald would sit on the stones, hands folded, heart steady, and let the silence wrap around him. He spoke less and listened more, trusting that the valley would tell him what it needed. As summer deepened, word of the valley's rebirth spread far beyond Yorkshire. Conservationists visited from other counties, hoping to learn from the unlikely coalition that had saved a piece of English wildness from destruction. Reginald watched young volunteers plant new trees, mend ancient fences, and teach the next generation how to see with fresh eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the stones glowed amber in the fading light, Reginald gathered the community together in the valley for a quiet celebration. There was no speech, no fanfare, just neighbors sharing bread, children chasing each other in the tall grass, the herd grazing unafraid among the crowd. Reginald stood at the edge, arms folded, heart full. He had found a different kind of nobility, one that required no title, no wealth, only the willingness to listen, to act, and to hope. The valley had changed him, just as it had changed everyone who truly saw it. In that gentle twilight, he understood. Stewardship was not a burden, but a gift, and in protecting the wild heart of Yorkshire, he had saved his own. Autumn swept gently across Yorkshire, painting the valley in burnished gold and deep green, the last wildflowers nodding in the cool breeze. Mornings came with a soft mist clinging to the grass and the ancient stones, as if the land itself were drawing a blanket around its shoulders. In the heart of it all, the wild ponies grazed peacefully. Romer, now steady and whole, the young foal at his side, the herd stronger than ever. For Reginald Beaumont, these days felt both like a reward and a responsibility, a quiet season for gratitude, reflection, and passing on what he had learned. The valley's transformation was no longer a headline or a trending hashtag, but a living, breathing reality. The National Trust Team worked with local volunteers to restore the broken walls and tend the native hedgerows. School children visited every week, learning not just about wildlife, but about history, respect, and stewardship. Reginald, never one for classrooms, found himself unexpectedly drawn to these mornings, walking alongside the teachers, answering questions, sometimes telling stories beneath the circle of old stones while Romer grazed nearby. He kept his lessons simple. "The valley belongs to itself," he would say, voice calm. "We're just visitors, lucky enough to care for it a little while. What we protect today is a gift to those who come after us." It's not about being a hero. It's about showing up, paying attention, and choosing again and again to do the right thing, especially when it isn't easy. Sometimes the children would ask about the battle, how he'd faced lawsuits and threats, how he'd kept going when it all felt hopeless. Reginald never sugarcoated it. "I wanted to quit more than once, but every time I was ready to give up, someone stepped in. Eleanor, Oliver, even the farmers who once doubted me, and always the valley itself, the sound of water, the ponies, the promise that something precious was worth fighting for." He noticed in those moments how the smallest voices often carried the greatest wisdom. One quiet boy, trailing behind the group, asked, "Did you ever wish you could keep it all to yourself?" Reginald considered, then shook his head. "Sometimes." but it would have been a lonelier victory. Places like this are meant to be shared, wisely, gently, never forgetting their limits. If we care for the valley, it cares for us. The years of struggle began to fade, replaced by a steady rhythm of life and renewal. Eleanor stayed in the village, splitting her time between scientific research and guiding conservation efforts. She and Reginald became not just colleagues, but close friends. Two people joined by a hard-won trust. Oliver, too, flourished, his farm thriving with sustainable practices and a new respect for the land. Even Croft and his stubborn band of farmers had found pride in their partnership, bringing old wisdom and fresh commitment to every meeting. But Marcus Blackwood, despite all his money and lawyers, had moved on to other projects. The valley he once saw as profit had proven stronger than contracts or ambition. Reginald no longer thought of him with bitterness, just a sense of sadness for those who saw only what they could take, never what they could learn. As the first cold nights approached, Reginald spent more time by the fire, writing in his journal, sorting old letters, sometimes reading aloud the entries his ancestors had written centuries before. He saw with fresh eyes that every generation had faced its own challenges: wars, plagues, lean years, moments of doubt. The lesson was always the same: resilience, patience, and the courage to act when the time came. On a gray morning in late October, Reginald stood before a gathering of local students and their families, a new plaque ready to be unveiled near the spring. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air full of promise. Eleanor spoke first, her words sharp and bright as autumn air. This valley stands because people cared, because they remembered that heritage isn't just stone or legend, but living, growing, changing every day. Then Reginald stepped forward, his hands steady, his heart full. He spoke quietly, but his words carried. Every head turned to listen. If there's one thing I hope you remember, it's this: nature teaches us humility, patience, and the value of small, persistent acts. You don't have to be a hero, just someone who notices, who speaks up, who loves a place enough to stand for it. Let this valley be your teacher, too. He watched as the children's hands reached out to touch the rough surface of the new plaque, their voices soft as they read the inscription. For all who listen and care, the valley endures. Romer and the herd watched from the edge of the clearing, heads raised, ears flicking, as if in approval. In the weeks that followed, Reginald kept a quiet pace, spending his mornings with the ponies, his afternoons mentoring the next generation of caretakers, his evenings at the village pub with Eleanor and Oliver, telling stories and laughing until the windows steamed over. The loneliness that had once haunted him seemed like a distant memory, replaced by purpose, belonging, and a kind of gentle joy he had never expected to find. And yet, he never forgot what brought him here: the pain of loss, the weight of failure, the stubborn hope that something beautiful could still be saved. He knew now that every life holds moments of darkness and light, that every story is shaped by those willing to rise and try again. The valley had given him back his own heart. As winter crept over the hills, Reginald often found himself at the stone circle just before dusk, Romer's foal at his side, the cold wind carrying distant laughter and the promise of spring. He knew others would come, that new threats and challenges would rise. But he also knew that the land was strong, and so was the community that had learned, together, to honor it. He wrote a final note in his journal, one he hoped would be read by future generations. If a wild pony ever leads you to something precious, listen. Let yourself be changed. And when the moment comes, stand for what you love, no matter the odds. This is how we make meaning of our time. This is how the valley endures. And with that, Sir Reginald Beaumont smiled, tipped his hat to the gathering dusk, and walked home across the fields, at peace at last, with the world and with himself.